two formidable dames of Irish poetry today, very glamorous as well, I have to say. Jean O'Brien and Mary Aosdána. They're contemporaries, releasing their first collections in 1990 and 92 respectively, and they're friends. Jean O'Brien, she's on her 7th collection, published by Salmon. She's the recipient of the Arvon International Poetry Award, and this year she's won the Patrick Kavanagh Fellowship. She also won the Fish, and she was highly commended for her foreword. Fiona Sampson said about her in the Irish Times that it is effortless writing, graceful and exact as any pirouette in its insight. And reading them, I found myself smiling a lot. She's a lovely light touch, humour in them. Her dealing when she's a poem by Schrodinger's cat, and it's about the cat being duped. Really delicate descriptions, I heard once that a sonnet is perfect length for a thought, and her poems seem to fit a thought beautifully. They never drag, lovely proportions, and never gives too much away. So I'll leave you to enjoy the poetry, and welcome Jean O'Brien to the stage.
Yes, housekeeping, phones off, everyone. I just say that because I was reading myself in Wales years ago, and my phone rang while I was on the stage. What do you say then? But I was with a reader at the time, Ivor Aquin, if anyone knows him, and he took his shirt off and sailed across the stage on his knees. So I thought, what's an old phone ringing between friends, you know? So anyway, I got started. I decided today to read a poem that I wrote recently just for Valentine's Day, and as yesterday was Valentine's, I thought, sure, a little bit of love, we can do with a little bit of love. Love needs. There needs to have been a winter, harsh and extraordinary, where you stripped down like a leafless tree, your branches black and bare. Your heart needs to have been emptied and spare, hollowed out and waiting. You need to have grown resilient and strong, to have regrouped, be sanctuary to your undersong, and gathered yourself to your true self again. You need to become home to your own heart. Then when spring inches in, you need to leaf up, green out and flourish, tender, wild and strong. Your heart needs to blow open with blossoms, scatter buds like fat drops of rain. You need to feel March winds, those April fevers. And I meant to say this was on Sunday Miscellany for Valentine's last Sunday. That was the bit I forgot to mention. And to say thank you very much for Pat and all at the Cork Festival for inviting me down. I'm delighted to be here. And as the other Mary, because we've two Marys, told you, I'm very proud of having won the Fish International Award down here. I think it was way back in 2008. And I was really delighted to take the money off the Cork men, to win the prize, yes, you know what I mean. And this next poem is just on the idea, it's a humorous, well, I like to think it's humorous, on the idea, which I did read about a woman being the only person left in the world who spoke her own language. And it was some language, it's not Urdu, which is one of the well-known Indian languages, it was something like Uru. And she was the last person left. And I just thought that's a very strange thing to be the only person who speaks your language. Obviously the woman could speak other languages, but this is just on this idea of words escape us, is what it's called. There is one person left in the whole wide world who speaks Uru. She could be dead or dying even as we speak. She keeps herself to herself, since the second last person who spoke Uru died. The fact is, they had fallen out some years before over something that was said, and now no longer conversed. Instead, they stared wordlessly at one another whenever they met. Left to herself, she sang, her clear voice mushrooming, lilting and ululating like the golden frill on a chanterelle. When she is dying, her last words, the last words of Uru, will hang suspended, cantillating in the air as if held in a gibbet. When she is dead, no mourners will utter a last farewell in her mother tongue, as they return her to the mute, trampled earth. Sorry, just getting my page. Yes, I'm sure we've all had this when we were young, climbing trees and carving our initials on them. And I used to live beside the River Dodder in Dublin and walk there regularly. And the tree that I had carved my name on when it was a sapling was fallen over as a grown-up tree. And it was just really funny to try and find my own initials that were kind of half discernible there. So it's called Feld. This place is in a quiet uproar. The tree has broken rank from the stand and lies, roots exposed, on the grass. It is early, the park is empty. School children have been and gone and won't be back until the next bell sounds, which leaves me here with the stricken tree. Already colonies of beetles are gathering for a full frontal assault. Lichen is sending out spore scouts to test the terrain. Everything is up for grabs. I am rooted. I recognize this tree, know its branches intimately. My young self swarmed its trunk. The branches cradled me between clear air and green grass that waited should I miss a step or underest my weight and the sapling strength of this young tree. I climbed and broke cover, became part of the canopy of trees. Rows of chimneys rose from grey slate roofs. The birds pecking the ground below looked displaced, and I seemed that bit nearer to the sky. I made the first cut then, made my mark bite into the living trunk, watched sap weep and felt a pang, but the urge to leave my name like a three-way secret between us, the sky, me and the tree, was deep. Now I find the initials grown distorted, like loss that warps when left unattended. The tree tried to heal the breach, but however faint and however it goes against the grain, I see those letters and a younger me clambering higher than I'll ever be again. I touch the wound and walk. Okay, how are we doing? Now, the next one I'll read is the one that I got the Fish Prize for, the Stolen Sheelany Gig, it's called, and it's in this book, just to say. I think they're all in the other book anyway, but I like to confuse myself with books. Okay. I don't know, I think most people here do know what a Sheelany gig is, the Irish fertility symbol. Quite a crude rendering of basically a woman's face and her vagina being pulled open. And when the church kind of took over in Ireland, they decided to incorporate some of the pagan images. So very strangely, you will still see on some churches these symbols, and you'll sort of take a second look and no, you're not imagining what it is you're looking at. And I read this story about one of them being stolen. So I decided to write the poem from the point of view of the Sheelany gig. And it's called The Stolen Sheelany Gig of Ahagour Speaks. Set high above the doorway, under the flying buttress, pocked now with age and lately turned to stone, I sat. Know me, I whisper, I am woman, I am prone, with my etched lashless eyes, hairless head, grinning mouth and triangular nose. How could I tempt anyone? The wind and rain are always at me, lashing me, leaving me lonely. Someone saw me and desired me, swayed by my crude posturing. my endless fertility. When I open my thighs, the world flows in and the world flows out. I have spent all my life so far exposed above Ahagaur, perched in my place, knowing the world through the spread of my lips. In the unconditional dark, someone dethroned me, uncroned me, made me young and beautiful again. I shrieked, leave me be, I am happy. And how are we doing? This next poem, I have a lot of poems. Sorry, it's just wrong book. I wrote a lot of my poetry about, sorry, I just seem to have got myself slightly mixed up on my pages. So, just try and find it here. Yeah. I wrote a lot about my mother who killed herself from manic depression. I think it's called bipolar nowadays. When the summer I turned 15, and obviously she had been a very ill woman before that, and things had been fairly chaotic, and they were certainly chaotic afterwards because she left 3 younger children that I ended up bringing up, but never mind all that. I found a photograph, or somebody gave me a photograph of my mother as a young woman sitting on a swing, you know, one of those classical poses, and I just looked at it and thought, this poor woman did not know how life was going to unravel for her, and wrote the poem, and it's called Before. This is a girl of 17, a side view, seated on a swing, hung from a chestnut tree, her dress hitched by the wind. This is a picture of my mother before I was her daughter, before her father disowned her, before she married my father, before she had 6 children. This was all before the swinging 60s that could not free her, before the doctors, before the hospital stays grew longer and longer, before they fed the electricity into her poor head that failed to help her, before the priest offered prayer as a cure, before the shock of her own mother's death hit home. This is my mother before I saw her dead in the bed, her cold hands clutching at air, before life swung full circle and could no longer hold her. This is her on that green day, skirt askew, hair streaming out, holding the ropes of the swing taut, rushing to meet her future, arcing in the air before her. How are we doing time-wise? Big boss?
Another 10 minutes.
Another 10 minutes, okay. The next poem I will read is called Merman, of which I was delighted to win the Arvon International and got plenty of money for. And as I tell people who think I'm joking, but people who know me know I'm not, I had bills, we all have bills. I had the taxman, we all have the taxman. The money came in and I said, to hell, I'm going on a cruise to the Caribbean. So I did, spent it. Taxman can't get it when you're flying in the Caribbean. And we all still owe money afterwards, who gives a damn, you know, happy money. So this is a poem called Merman, based on an old tale of a woman called Scylla, who this man, who he was able to he was a fisherman who was able to bring fish back to life. And I think the idea was, it's a bit like, you know that old tale with the person who always has the shilling in their pocket, no matter how many times they take it and spend it, it's still there. So I think that's the same idea, was the fish, he could always get more fish or a live fish. Anyway, he fancied this woman called Scylla, and she clearly didn't fancy him. And by a lot of a circuitous route, he kind of fooled her and basically ended up raping her. So for some reason I thought this would be a good idea for a poem. Anyway, as I say, it got me to the Caribbean, so have poem will travel. Merman. I had been working in the fish farm for weeks, that one near the river outlet and the sea. I didn't like the work. We were constantly wet, dirty. Didn't like the men there either. They were insolent, often dropped small fry and crushed them underfoot. One in particular, Glaucus, tall, muscular, cast his sea-green eyes over me, tried to lure me as I tipped phosphorus feed into the holding pens that smoked and stank and made mist veils I tried to hide within. One day he walked towards the tanks, waders held in his large hands. He was chewing on a herb he said was magical, always urging me to eat it. I would not bite. Anyway, whatever way it was, he leaned to pull the waders on. Both legs got caught in one boot, and over he flipped. I cast around for help. No one was there. I went back. He was emerging from amongst the shoals of salmon. Clinging to his single wader, up to his waist, were the glittering scales of smolts. He rose, shaking coloured sequins, water falling as he tried to right himself and beckoned me for help. I took the bait, and when I caught him, we stumbled. He landed me and pinned me down. I looked, held his eyes. It was early. The rising sun was flooding them with hooks of golden light. I said no. He parted my thighs, and when it was over, untangled his legs, shook the silver armour from himself. His eyes had lost their lustre. I left distraught and walked all day, stumbling over ditches and hillocks. Stopped now and then to eat, following the river to its source. At so many 100 feet, I rested where the stream welled from the earth, cooled my toes, kicked gravel into little pools, and felt the flow snagging in the waters of my womb. I cried and screamed and shook my fists at the sky. Knew then this birthing pool was to be my fate. Tried to obliterate his sea-green eyes, his face, his terrible merman tail. And two more, and then I finish. This next one is this next one is a poem again about my mother, and it's on the idea, that we all have about being able to wind time back and to change the outcome of the future. And sort of, I think when something important happens in your life, especially when you're young, it becomes a before and after in your life. It's everything before this happened, everything after it. And it's called Backward Step. We need to wind things back, put time in reverse, loop the ravelled ribbon, fill the spool with thread again. We need to empty out your grave, backfill the hole that gaped, spit out the oboe and let the wind restring your voice with new, clear breath. I will leave the blizzard of your still body coffined on the table in the living room. Undo the shroud pins and remove the brown Franciscan robe. Let us start that day over. No fight from me this time when you drive up on your motor scooter, your short hair helmeted around you, to where I wait, a bad-tempered teenager at a bus stop. I will draw my unicorn horn back in and turn my cheek the other way and receive your healing kiss. We will sit in the June sun together in our summer frocks and restring the beads of all the lives that warped to accommodate your loss. You will live to a fine old age, and I, your daughter, will in turn mother you. And then on a light note to finish up, I will read a poem that I personally like, and it was based on a true story, and it's been anthologized a couple of times for me. And it was based on a true story of being out in Texas visiting a visiting artist who happened to have a swimming pool in her garden, as you do in Texas. And this is all about 5 years ago, and we'd all go for a swim and grand, and off we go. And then she looked at me and she said, "You're not going to wear clothes, we're skinny dipping." And I found the nuns came out of my throat, and I said, no, I'm Irish. Don't ask, as they say. Maybe if I had been 30 years younger, I'd have done it, but I wasn't. So it's called skinny dipping. I'm Irish. We keep our clothes on most of the time. We perform contorted dances on beaches in Cork or Donegal, undressing under not yet wet towels, worried that any gap might expose us, lay some body part bare. It was the Immaculate Conception that did it. If Mary could conceive a child without removing her knickers, then by God the rest of us could undress and swim without baring our buttocks. We swam serene in freezing seas, goosebumps freckling our pale skin. We lay togged out on wet sand, desperate for the weak sun to dry us before performing the contorted dance in reverse. Now as I remove my clothes, peel them off, layer by layer, down to the bare, a brief moment of unease before the release of water baptizing skin. With a quiet, Jesus, Mary, I dive in. Thank you.
Next up, we've Mary O'Donnell. I don't know where to start. I have a very long list of publications here. So, poetry collections, of which she has 7, and most recent is The Ark Builders, published by Ark. But she also has 5 novels to her name, the first of which in 1992 won the Irish Tribune Best First Irish Novel Award. 2 collections of short stories, I think a collection of essays, a book of translations. I wondered if she'd sleep, so prolific. She's been a journalist as well, theatre criticism, and a series of poetry programmes on RTE were put together by her. She's taught extensively in NUI and Maynooth and in Trinity as well. Her collection, she's an anthropological eye, I think. There's a poem in it about the Palnabrone dolmen, and I thought I'd be getting lots of mythology about it. But no, it's a very disinterested teenager who's being dragged along. There's lovely love poems, the whole gamut from Eros to Philia. And of course, being a prose writer, there are lovely subtleties of character in there. So why not hear a few poems? Mary O'Donnell.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, and thanks for inviting me, Pat. I'm really delighted to be here at this great festival. I'm going to read a few relatively new poems, and then work backwards through a few of my collections. My interests, just broadly speaking, are things that pop up in my work quite a lot, have to do with the natural world, because I do think it is one of the great themes, landscape. I'm interested in that, in the environment. I tend to write about rooks a good deal. I'm interested in how women go about their lives in the world, and other things too, but I'll touch on some of these. And I am also interested in inspiration, and I read Ted Hughes's poem, is it Fox Night? Fox Night, or Fox, which is a poem all about inspiration, and I began to think, what would my source of inspiration be if I was to really bring it down to a creature. And anyway, this poem is called Muse. I want to be stolen by this two-legged creature, not quite human. He lives in the wild brackens beyond the garden. I must stay alert, alone, resist the cosmetic clatter of an evening of too many useless acts. Pointless to tempt him with inscribed saucers of scallops, marbled blue cheese, or the omega of bone marrow. His appetite is not sated on such fine produce. As he springs silently, rank as a goat, through the rime frost and a chink in the porch window, I inhale the funk of him, sense his stealth, have known it all my life. He stands at my back, caresses my arm, the one that cramps with the pain of staying put. His one silver hoof tapping a line, a rhyme on the floorboards. He scarcely whispers, yet, bothered by his absence these sullen months, I hear him clearly. Hush now, such sibilant breaths. I have broken the fences, the safe arbours that restrained you, have torn down the walls that bound you to silence. I twitch to answer, accepting his hand curl around mine. In an instant, our fingers shift across the moonlit desk. And this next one, I was tinkering away at it for quite a while before it, I think, fell into place. So I'm interested, of course, in our thoughts on continuity and how do we continue knowing the limitations of this life and all that. This is called Crow Knowledge. By All Hallows, the sympathy of crows fills the evening air as light fades and souls warm thin feet against a screen of blazing birch. They falter across a field of winter corn, bewildered, on an earth no longer theirs. How they long to lie abed, as tight in flesh as crows are in feather, roughed together, still bound to life. But the scold crows warn, this day and no further may you roam. Clearing skies make way for gods of frost, souls shiver at the memory of fires, wines, red meat. They recall smiles too, and themselves, once, raucous as the crows that scold them now. These black guardians tilt low, call time with beak and claw. As November's shim clouds lock beneath the horizon, their dark wings ferry the malingerers to eternity's twig-dark roost. And I'm just going to read another crow poem written maybe 25 or more years ago, and it's called The Crows Rewrite the Gospels in Maynooth, and it's from my second collection, Spider-Woman's Third Avenue Rhapsody. And I've always been fascinated by the activity of all these rooks around where we live, and there's just one reference in it, and in case you don't get it, but you probably will, but just in case, you know the way sometimes you used to see people carrying placards and signs with I am the Messiah and the end is nigh and all that sort of warning thing, and repent now. And coming from South Ulster, I saw loads of repent and the end is nigh. So the crows rewrite the Gospels in Maynooth. By late October, crows write poems in the clouds, unadulterated texts for anyone who dares to look. They draft first notes silently in fields. Speculative beaks transcribe leaf rot, limp grass, soil. Later, wrapped in gloomy cloaks, they rest on electricity pylons, flap their wings, frighten the soul's dark entities into submission. A timely surge decides it. Dense knots loosen, then clatter airwards. Crows remember to dot I's, cross every T as necessary to finished work. Each wingbeat exhorts, contradicts in soaring certainty. I am not the Messiah. The end is not nigh. Do not repent. The lines are scattered, free-form subversions lost to the eye. This one is called Those Prostitutes in Cuba, and it's based on an anecdote which a friend told me about his visit to Cuba. And I began to think of, well, the different expected behaviours sometimes of men and of women and so on. They were like two kittens, he said, snuggling up to him. They were fun and they liked him. I thought, against my own sex, how enviable his freedom to fall in with such company, then breakfast with them afterwards, heartily, admiring their health, their strong teeth, that vitality. It could never happen to a woman my age. Two tiger men who would not wound, the three of us so human in a dusky room, sunlight stealing through the slats in colours from Matisse, the riotous world within and without. And this is the last of the new ones, 20 inches of hair. He arrives weekly, after dawn, when the green pigeons feed on figs, seeds, yesterday's specks of rice. This is what a wife does for the children, for her keep. Besides, wives are expensive. With such hair, other men will desire her. The agent cuts first to her ears, having measured from nape of neck to base of spine, where the sacred serpent rests. But her kundalini, curled within its chill of poverty, does not rise to meet her spirit. Beads of sweat gather at her neck as he cuts, then cuts some more, the dark fronds tumbling to a metal bowl. Finally, his blade, from the crown down, skin shearing until skull is revealed, bald as a peacock's egg. Some woman will thank you, the agent mumbles. He gathers the hair, wipes the bowl. They will bleach the sacks of blue-black hair from India for the pleasure of a woman with blue eyes. Extensions, the agent assures her, the latest thing in England and elsewhere. Money changes hands, agent to husband. Rapidly, she draws the dupatta over her shamed head. The agent leaves. Outside, a peacock cries, "Ew, ew." Her husband returns, swings two green pigeons from his fingers. "Today's meat," he murmurs, avoiding her eye, places them, curl-clawed, beaks oozing, in the bowl that held her hair. And now I'm going to read the Pool na Brun Dolman, seeing as you mentioned it as well. We visited County Clare and the Pool na Brun Dolman as a family when my daughter was just 15, and you know, cultural Celtic things were not on her mind. She scowls at the horizon, opens up her phone, trails us on the holiday route. Every comment that day announces sullen on surprise. Girl, frog-marched, texting through the burren. All those sad rocks, she moans. We inflict on her our Celtic marvels, the ancient dead within stone chambers, porticos and grikes. After, a photo shows a cloud bank, the capstone, her averted face. The dolman shouldering the sky, squat-haunched in a wilderness, as much itself in spleen as she is now. I touch the stone as if to feel it breathe. Instead, I brush against my daughter's rightful grit as she resists the culture of the tribe that today tells her things she does not want to know. And there is a time for everything, I think, and intergenerationally we sometimes misjudge. Anyway, the next poem is called Following Frida, as in Frida, and I'm thinking of Frida Kahlo and her wonderful monobrow, but also the disparities between choosing to have that kind of facial hair and the way we are now. That monobrow wouldn't work today. Girls wax the in-betweens, the ups and downs, smooth, smooth. Sometimes the greenery around the hacienda itches so much we sneeze and tickle, create unnecessary frowns, a slippage. There's always Dr. Death, of course, his bright smile, that happy mouth inviting us to pout and make kiss shapes. Kiss, 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 he urges. His short needle makes cushions of our worries. Little prick here, another there, there. It's all right, darlings. Growing old needn't hurt so badly. The hairs remind us, marching to link brow to brow, shadowing our lips. We want to be Frida, earnest with hair, mocking Dr. Death's short needle before it punctures our flesh. Old, old, we shout the words he hates, loose and old, not tight and old. Senses, raging, in need of colour as we behold ourselves mirror-wise, the women we always were, just older, looser, still there. And I'll read a few now from my last collection, those April Fevers. Again with the title poem, I use a phrase from this poem as my title. The poem is actually called Baltic Amber, and again I suppose I'm dealing with ideas of time passing, growing older, how we mark time. Someone said I would uncover pieces of amber from long dead trees on this Baltic shoreline. Day by day, I leave the cottage, walk the sands to a headland village. Nobody understands what I mean when I mention amber. Their minds engrossed by hazel branches hung with painted eggs, catkins, or hyacinths in bowls. The time for hyacinths is long gone, I tell them. I am in need of something that has survived more than winter, hardening to translucent gold, enclosing perhaps one small seed to honour the month and Easter I was conceived. I have grown 6 decades like aeons, and my tears have surely become like amber, enriched and smooth, taking tawny colours for blood. Next week, I will be casual about the search, will uncover nuggets beneath tree fragments, inhaling salt and resin as I turn freely from eggs, catkins, those April fevers. And again, just coming back to the idea of generations, and in this case, three generations of women. This poem is called Feeding the Crone, and I see the crone in a very positive light, being on my way to cronedom myself, and so there is a crone, a mother and a granddaughter, so you could say a grandmother, mother and daughter in this poem, and it's really all about fertility coming and going, I do think, and maybe time passing. The crone is knocking on my door. Despite myself, I open. A north wind gusts in. Any chance of a cup of tea, she asks, conciliatory, as if we hadn't been through this rigmarole several times already. I wouldn't begrudge a person the chance to wet their lips. I'd throw in a biscuit or two, not to mention a slice of the cake my daughter made yesterday. That's what she needs. A young girl's cake, duck eggs and spelt flour, nutmeg and bitter butter, her generous finger sifts. I slip the crone a huge triangle, knowing she won't say no. Blue and white frosting sidle down the sides, stick to her fingers, make their way to sweeten her mouth. She swallows and licks, casts a glance at the cake a second time. Again, I cut deep to fill her sagging belly. What else would I do? By the time she's done, she hesitates in the doorway, a smile almost cracking her jowls. That was some cake, she whispers, turning away, patting herself as if she was pregnant. And I do find sometimes that I am interested in the translation of poetry and just how a poem that is considered slack, quite slack to us, might be considered absolutely perfect in perhaps Catalan or Galician, because from culture to culture we definitely have different ideas on what works as a strong poetic line. But I was in Hungary some years ago when a selection of my poetry was translated to Hungarian, but unfortunately it wasn't a bilingual translation, so I didn't really know what had been done, but I was very happy to have this collection. And on my way back on the plane, I was just looking at it and reminded of the stamps that I used to collect as a child, and the Polish and Hungarian ones were particularly beautiful and showed off all kinds of athletic Iron Curtain achievement. And so I was thinking of all these things as I was struggling with the Hungarian, which of course I couldn't possibly understand. Hungary came to me in stamps. Magyar posta ice skaters, delicate as empire porcelain. A fish, an astronaut and rocket, a silvery boy on 1960s skis. I understood only difference. Now, flying home from Budapest, I touch the pages of my poems freshly minted in translation. Now I really don't get them, but did I ever? The words will make me briefly native to a coffee-slugging morning reader on the Vasi Ut, who may not understand, even in his own tongue. The lines blur as night slips through the tilting, crowded cabin. Again, I press fingers to page, blind, as if by touch I could capture a fish, an astronaut, a rocket, or those elegant ice-cutting skaters. Outside, clouds I cannot see busily translate country to country. And how am I for time? 5 minutes, maybe, or about that. That be all right? Okay, so I'll just read just 2 or 3 more. This next one is called Galician Watchdog, and on a couple of occasions when I have visited the woman with whom I edited a book of Galician women's poetry translated into English and Irish, and on both occasions in the house beside hers there has been this little fawn dog just chained up barking, and he was still there. I mean, this is 6 years later when I was there last August. I don't like the idea of dogs chained up, but there is, in Galicia, there is of course an ongoing debate about the survival of their language, which is much more widely spoken than the Irish language is here. And it is quite important. I think it might be, I couldn't say how many million it's spoken by, but anyway, you have Keith Payne down here in Cork, I believe, or you have had him in the university, and he speaks Galician and has done a lot of work in translation. But although just as it was here in the Gaeltacht areas, although the language may have been spoken at home, once children go to school and mix with other children, of course, it's diminished and it fades. So it's the same in Galicia. Galician watchdog. Manoli says the farmers are not sentimental. The chained fawn dog guards the house, watches what moves within the mists, his ears like pinnacles. If the sun flares on a wet stone, he barks. If the farmer's granddaughter exclaims at new lambs, his ears swallow her voice. He barks thrice, then stops. She speaks to her grandfather in the mother tongue. Manoli says that once they go to school, they lose the words. The fawn dog watches cyclists, children, sheep, caped men bound for Finisterre, frustrated by those with permission to walk. Around him, the world gulps some words, vomits others. He knows his place. He knows he has no say. And that's often the case, that languages have no say eventually. Just picking up on what Jean was, that poem of hers about the woman who was the last speaker. This one is called The Parts, and it refers to waxen parts that I saw in an ethnographic museum in Santiago de Compostela. They're really votive things, models of parts of the body that are ill or disabled, and people would make wax, a waxen form of a womb or a breast or a hand or a penis or whatever, wherever the problem was, and lay these in certain places. So this one is probably about belief, and also it's a category of, it's a kind of a catalogue of suffering, as I have observed it in people I know, perhaps. Let us collect a waxen body part from the corner shop just after dawn, before the newspapers are delivered. An arm for you, a hip for me, a heart for him, phallus, breast, or tongue. Even if we no longer believe in a God, and no one in their right mind believes there is a celestial form which our ailments will fit for the cure of misdreamed bodies, let us take the waxen parts of the old aunt's failing limbs, the claw of her paralysed arm, her frozen right leg, trembling bottom lip, a tongue which forgets to close off saliva. Take her wheelchair also. It has absorbed the illness, needs molecular healing. Take a daughter's S-shaped spine, the scar tissue on her left lung. Let us bear the knots of the fishmonger's arthritis, his pinched feet and short, hot tendons. Lay them in wax on an operating table where belief in a God is not required. Take our parts in wax. Lay them as a sign that multitudinous fragments, hanging hearts and phalluses, used up wombs, legs, arms, and spines, may despite all rise as one, to be read and marvelled at, even before the newspapers are delivered. And I don't want to leave you on a bleak note either, so I'm just going to read one more, and it's not very long, even though, of course, I know we can all cope with bleakness, but so this is called Summer Salsa Maggiore, and it's a love poem really directed at my husband. The cousins come again, 4 years from the last party in the Violet Hills. They quicken at the sight of one another, rare sightings making moments precious. Since the last, one partygoer has left, fought her cancer, talked of new beginnings. There were none, only continuity, the hope of drawing down, like the cousins, another thread from the garment of memory, childhood's trove of misremembered tales, chased and polished to fit the need of each. Around the evening garden they wander, mingle beneath a sunset-hammered sky, freed around the pool. Later, koans on her mind, dance me to the end of love. But the couples, unromantic to the last, are whirling demons loosed beneath the marquee. Suddenly, a husband caught off guard, his eyes uncertain, as if the scene has somehow unnerved him. She wants to leave the cousins' clatter, the narcissism of camera flare at every move and smile, run with him down past the pool, slip off her satin, she and he in a madness of leaves, late gummy gnats, the hillside moths. Thanks very much for your attention.
So you prose and poetry, and I'm wondering, when you turn to write prose, do you have to put it on a very different mode? Like if there's a rhyme showing up, do you have to say, ah no, we won't go with that because that would be too perfect, kind of?
They are very, is that working? Yes. They are very different styles of type of genres just, and I'm either doing one or the other. I would never write a poem if I was really stuck in fiction and vice versa. I mean, at the moment I'm writing some poems, but I'm not writing fiction, though that may be for time reasons as well. You need lots of time. But I think sometimes I do think that some of my poetry may leak into my fiction, and my tendency to edit and edit and edit. I think, and sometimes there is some crossover, but I'm not conscious of it, I think.
One of your poems, the poem about the woman, it was she was the last one with that language. Poetry is a very personal language, and I'm just wondering if sometimes you have to kind of, your own experiences are too personal, and you have to think of the reader, and something that's resonant for you, you have to leave it aside and go out.
I suppose you have to try and make your own personal experiences into art in some way. So you have to try and heighten the language, even though a lot of poets, as Seamus Heaney said, if we hadn't had childhoods, we'd have had nothing to write about. And there's a lot of truth in that. We do tend quite a bit to delve into our own lives, but you are then trying to offset it somewhat, to make it different and strange and to see it in new eyes, if you know what I'm trying to.
Can I ask about how the poetry scene has changed? You've been on the scene, and like gatherings like this. No, but gatherings like this, I was talking to people last night, and they were saying there's a lot more fights and drunkenness. No, that's not your experience. There was. And even how interested the public is in poetry, maybe. Has that changed?
I think we share the mic here. So you want us to admit to drunkenness and fights?
Are the gatherings as they were?
I think they are. Yeah, I think it's still the same. Can I be heard here? I think there's still the same level of interest. People do come to readings and big festivals like this. They don't come that much to, ordinary, what we call the ordinary bookshop ones. And I don't think people buy much poetry unless it's at festivals. But the scene itself does seem to be very healthy. And I think but it has changed since I started in the early 80s, very definitely. I think that women of my generation had to justify themselves a lot more at that time than women of the equivalent age now would have to. And it's good that they don't have to now. I think it's much healthier for younger writers as an environment in this country. In that creativity is it's probably not quite as closed off to a certain group as it might once have been. That's just my impression.
I'm just thinking, as Mary was talking there, the sort of famous or infamous Poetry Ireland review that was edited by Tom McCarthy back in, I think, the early 80s. 1984, and he had a strong majority of women, and only a few men in it. Now, obviously, women of a certain age were well used to that the other way around. You barely noticed it at the time. And I always remember that issue was called the women's issue, whereas the other ones weren't called the men's issues. I just always remembered that. So in that sense, as Mary said, the world has changed and become healthier, and you know, we write about different interests perhaps. I remember many years ago at a workshop, a young lad said to me, he said, but my poem is universal, yours is for women. And I remember thinking the confidence he had to say that. You know, I remember thinking,
Male privilege.
you know, he was a young fellow. You know, the only difference I can say is I'm well out of published him since. That's the best of the age, as they say.
Like, I think that there has been a breaking down of poetry borders from country to country, in that through translation initiatives. And Pat, you ran a very successful one. How many years ago is it? Where you got a number of, it was you, wasn't it? There were a number of books translated.
Oh yes, we did. Yeah, we published quite a few.
Yeah, I mean, that was really fantastic. And so there's a greater consciousness of the poetic forms in other countries now than that's my impression. That certainly this wouldn't have happened in the 1970s, not in a million years. Whereas now poets from different countries are working together, and that collaborative thing, I think, is useful and as well as interesting.
I just wanted to ask you about, do you think like you should write poetry because you want to write it or because you have to write it? And is there too many poets nowadays writing because they think they can, just because, you know, they want to have a go, rather than the poets that have to write it?
I leave that one to Mary.
I'm quite happy to take that. I think that, you know, the idea of creativity, I do think creative thinking is actually available to everybody, and that you don't have to be a writer in order to think creatively. Does that, I mean, that's the best way I can answer that. I think it is good that people have the possibility of at least exploring this to see if it's something that is for them. I don't see anything wrong with that. I suppose I'd welcome it, because probably as I teach poetry, if it's teachable, but I do teach poetry on a university course, and I know that attending certain workshops helped me as a younger poet very definitely. It encouraged me in this foolish way of life that I've continued with, you know. But I think, yes, if you feel you must do this, I think you should follow it.